Good afternoon, everybody. As Ian said, the presentation today, we're just going to go through some of the projects that were undertaken in Westport as part of the HTI pilot project back in 2013 and 2014. I'm just going to go through a couple of the projects, and then Siobha will talk about the Built Heritage projects. So for those of you who don't know Westport, it's one of the key towns in Mayo. It's located on the western seaboard on the southeastern shores of Clew Bay. It has a population of approximately 6,500 in the last census, and it's a planned estate town. The current Westport House then was built in the mid-18th century, and 250 years ago, last year, an ad was placed in the Faulkner's Journal looking for tradespeople to come and build the current town of Westport. And it's a key tourism destination, and I suppose that's been consolidated by its location on the Wild Atlantic Way and also the Great Western Greenway. So these are just some of the projects we're going to talk about, and Jackie has touched on a few of them already. So I suppose a key part of the HTI was the partnerships that were forged as part of the initiative, and which continue, I suppose, to this day. And I think that's really key to the success of the initiative. So I've just listed some of the partners that were involved, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of them. And again, the whole community buy-in has been very important, and working with sort of national and more local groups as well. One of the first projects, I suppose, that we funded, and it was mentioned as well, Falch Ireland were involved in the initiative, and they were very keen on animation, and we commissioned Pádraig Brannock, the T.G. Cahir presenter, storyteller, actor, writer, to write a history of Westport and the Westport House. And this was turned into an animated historical tour of the town and of Westport House, a 60-minute tour that took place every day during the summer months at regular intervals. And we used local actors and what we call tourism ambassadors that were working in the town under a FÁ scheme. And it has proven to be very popular, and it has continued on every year since it was initiated back in 2013. Again, this was mentioned earlier. In 2012, I think the Irish Times invited people to nominate the place they live as the best place to live in Ireland, and they invited people to write a short pitch explaining why they thought that their town was the best place to live. And a guy called John O'Callaghan, who's originally from Westport but living in Wexford and holds Westport very dear to his heart, wrote a piece, and it was Westport was shortlisted. And then the judges came to, I think 4 or 5 towns were shortlisted, and the judges came then. Maureen Gaffney and Paul Keogh, architect, and a couple others came and spent a day or two in Westport, and following the judging process then Westport was voted the best place to live. To celebrate that, a house party was held in Westport House, which was a really successful day, and that's John being presented by the editor with the award from the editor of the Irish Times. And following on from that, then there was a public art sculpture commission. And it was a competition again, and there was a judging panel on it. Aidan Dunn, art critic of the Irish Times, and Frank MacDonald were on the judging panel. And again, the site has been shown. This was the site that was chosen for the sculpture. It's a key site. I suppose it's on a junction, sort of a difficult enough site, I suppose, and I think this was where in the surveys that were carried out that the community were complaining about the overhead wires. So it's at the junction of Quay Street and Peter Street in Westport, and the sculpture that was chosen was called the Sentinel, and it was designed by a locally based sculptor, Ronan Halpin, who's living in Westport, and the surrounding public realm works were then done as part of the HTI. The study day then that was carried out, this was done, or that was ran. This was in partnership with the Irish Georgian Society, and there was a panel of speakers ranging from academics to conservation professionals and practitioners. And it was a full day of talks exploring Westport House and the town of Westport, looking at things like the Browns and Westport House, the historical and social significance, the architectural significance and conservation of Westport House itself, and then the interiors and the collections within Westport House, and then finally the landscape and the urban morphology. Again, that was a very successful project, and it was repeated again last year as part of the celebrations for Westport's 250 celebrations, marking, I suppose, the year when that ad was put into the paper. So myself and Siobha have been running ongoing traditional skills training courses over the last number of years as part of the County Mayo Heritage Plan. And this slide shows a training day that was run actually on the grounds of Westport House back in, I think, 2011. It was lime and stonewalling. You can see Pat McAfee there. These workshops are aimed at local authority staff, professional, professionals. There's private architects and engineers, and then community groups, rural social scheme, tidy towns. I suppose anybody really that's involved in the management and conservation of historic buildings or historic structures. So when it came then to the HTI, we had a group of trained people based in Westport that we were able to call upon and who could work on some of the projects. So this is just a slide of two of the rural social scheme participants carrying out repairs to the workhouse boundary wall. So I suppose that just kind of shows the value of having, the long-term programs going as well. Another project is the walled garden, the Westport House walled garden decorative gate restoration project. As you can see, this gate was underused and totally falling apart, and very bad state of repair. So we, with the HTI funding, we contracted Bushy Park Ironworks to carry out some restoration work on the gate. It's cast and wrought iron, copper and brass, and we salvaged what we could from what we found around the base of the gate, and then other parts were remoulded and cast, and then used salvaged wrought iron. And there you can see the finished gates in the picture on the bottom left. And I suppose the roof of the gate was also in a bad state of repair, and Sheelan Brown from the Brown family of Westport House funded the repair of the roof. And then the walled garden has now become the home to a captive breeding programme for the old Irish goats. There's a herd of old Irish goats around in the hills outside Mulvaney, and a local voluntary group established themselves, the Old Irish Goat Society, and their role, I suppose, is the preservation and the promotion of the old Irish goat. So now there's a breeding and a husbandry program running in the walled garden. So I suppose it's just a nice mix of built and living natural heritage. So they're a rare breed. They're under threat of extinction due to crossbreeding and culling. A lot of people don't like to see goats around. The Clubay Heritage Centre in Westport is the home of the Westport Historical Society, and they're heavily involved in the interpretation and promotion of heritage in Westport. They run tours, they do an outreach programme with the local schools, and they have a publication, Carhan March, which is a really good historical publication for that comes out once a year. This is their centre. It was suffering from water ingress, and it had a severe flooding episode. I think it was 2014, and we used some of the funding was used to fund repairs to the roof. And then the Edible Landscape project, which was mentioned already. This is planting native fruit trees and developing a linear orchard along the Great Western Greenway. And it was nice to have, I suppose, another natural heritage project in the pilot. And this is the chair of the town council at the time, talking to some of the local school kids and planting some areas. And that's been extended then to other areas along the Great Western Greenway, out to Newport and Mulranny and Achill. So when you're cycling and walking along, you can be feeding yourself. It'll probably take a few years before that'll happen. So I'll just hand over to Siobha now, who's going to talk about the Built Heritage project.
I'm just going to run through, it's all really built heritage projects. So this is an early map before the first edition Ordnance Survey, which it's dated around 1808, so it gives quite a clear layout of the core of the town, the historic core. Now we can't see the dots, but there's where the river comes along there. It's in a more natural formation, and then it was canalised in the straight axis there, which forms the Mall and gives the vista down to Westport to Mayo. So we have a couple of projects. One is the painting scheme project, which I think all the historic pilot towns did. So that sort of has been covered, but just to give the location of them, one of them is at the top there where you see that grove of trees. It's called Grove House. And the other one is at the bottom of the North Mall, which is to my side of the river. And it was known as the Railway Hotel. So that's the before image. And a lot of properties, I suppose, around 2013 were either in NAMA or were held by the bank, so it's very difficult for them to be sold because the title deeds and various issues. So this property was for sale, Grove House. It's at 1850s, built on the site of an 18th century house. So the basement of the house still remains of the earlier house. And the facade of the house, the main facade, is on the opposite side that would have been facing into the garden and the trees. So I'm afraid development occurred on the site of the garden, so it's quite constricted to the other side now. So we just selected that. We contacted a lot of owners about painting schemes, but not all were amenable to have the building painted, even though it was being funded. So that's the before photo, this is the afterwards. So about 6 months later it was sold. We like to think it's because it was painted and that kind of, but it has been bought now, and a conservation plan was commissioned by the owners, so they're carrying out works now. So it is a good news story in that the building is occupied now and conservation works are being carried out. So the next one then is the Railway Hotel, which is on the North Mall, and it is unoccupied still, the central part. I mean, there is hairdressers to the left and shops to the right, but still not occupied, but I think it needed a bit of help, so that's the painting scheme there. So then we're on to window repairs. Likewise, not all people, we identified the buildings that had original sash windows, and surprisingly there weren't so many of them still left, so that makes them a very important part of our historic fabric that we should try and save as much as possible. And smaller amounts of money can make a big impact to a whole facade, and it means you're retaining the character of the building. So this is on the South Mall. A lot of the occupants along the Mall, are in retirement really, so there are not really any young families living along that area. So we approached the owner of this building, and he was amenable to having the windows repaired. So Conservation let a frack were the successful contractors to carry out that work, and they took the windows to their workshop. And so we repaired the ground floor window to the left of the door and the 3 windows at first floor level. And then this is another project this actually emerged. I mean, it's a very prominent derelict looking building on the Mall, which is in the centre of Westport. And it is occupied by 2 retired sisters. And when we were walking around the town with the Heritage Council and the department and other colleagues, this really was sort of screaming out at everyone. And Ian Doyle suggested that we get a structural report carried out on the building. So that was the first step. We commissioned a conservation engineer because there were really a lot of structural issues that had to be addressed first. So Chris Southgate was appointed and he carried out his report in 2013. So there are all the before photographs of the roof. There were lots of holes in the roof, water ingress, very dangerous structure inside. You know, it was a surprise when we went in how dangerous it was inside. So that's the before photos of that. And really it shows the benefit of having a plan for historic building, because then you have a breakdown of costs and a priority of works as well. So the first part to tackle was the roof to the left-hand side of the photo at the top over to the first chimney stack. So those works were funded in the first year, and we had a very good conservation contractor who's excellent at roof works, and so it was all about saving as much of the original timber structure as possible. So you can see there's a few rafters that are new, but most of it is spliced and retained. So that's the back of the roof there on the top right hand corner, and that's it afterwards. The ceilings were propped then in the dining room, which is to the right of the central door, and the props are still there. So it's not a completed project, and it could be 10 years or more before you could call it completed. So they remain in place. The windows were repaired as part of the HDI funding as well. And then later on, under the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, the remainder of the roof was then funded. So this piece to the front, to the right of the first chimney, and a return section of the roof, which actually that side of the building is in the river at that point. So that's the completed. You can see works to the scaffold at the beginning, and then the scaffold to the second roof the following year, and there are the repairs to the return windows along the more naturalised river edge. And that's the completed. It's called Bridge House, appropriately so, where it's located, but it is a very good example of return. I know that it wasn't vacant, but it does mean that it will retain in use for another 200 years. So I think it's a good model for regeneration within towns as well, because there are some costs that we have in it. So. And then that's just more window repairs that Jackie referred to, the Wyatt window. I think it's the only one that's left in Westport, so we had to save it. So the 2 windows were repaired, the Wyatt window to the left and the other window, and then we did some repairs to the pilasters to the door up to the first floor level. That's just photos of the interior before the window. That's in the workshop. We salvaged a lot of the window, so it's great conservation work. And then the final project, I suppose it was good that the HDI ran over the 2 years, because the talk we had with the Irish Georgian Society and all the people who came, all the specialists who came to the town the first year and talked about the various aspects of the interior of the house, this project then came out of that. So in a way it was good to have the 2 years, because things that came out of the first year then went into a tangible project in the second year. So David Skinner, we contacted him to ask his advice on the wallpaper, because he had given a talk on the history of Chinese wallpaper. It's around 1760 is the date of the wallpaper. So when we contacted David, he said it was, although he knew about the history, it wasn't his expertise to conserve it. So he recommended Mark Sandyford, who came from the UK and had worked on the Soane Museum and other National Trust properties. And then David Skinner and Susan Core worked with Mark, so there was good transference of skills there as well. And I mean, they only repaired the chimney breast part of that wall, so there's a lot more to be done there. But I think this map shows you the significance of the paper, because there's only one on the west coast that they know on this map that the National Trust created. So I think it goes back to realising what assets you have and how you can save them, really, because that's what's unique about each place. So I'll just leave the final slide up because I know we're run out of time. So that's sort of the things that we learned from the HDI. Thank you very much.